Good morning. Today is Tuesday, August 20, and it's a regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. I'd like to go over a couple of quick things. One is that Commissioner Bozovich is excused from today's meetings. Second, we have a 10 o'clock time certain with our friends from the Public Safety Coordinating Council. 4 p.m. we have an executive session, and at 5:30 p.m. we start a second public comment session. So it's a long day for us. There's no emergency business, so I'd like to call on Corey Buller to come up, and maybe Mr. Rickoff could help us recognize the Lane Event Center staff. And I know a bunch of you are here right now to be recognized, and welcome.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, thank you very much. Yes, we've asked Corey Buller is the fair manager, Rachel Bivens is the assistant fair manager to come up. We would like to thank you for letting us go first. As you can see, we have a pretty significant set of the crew here, and we do want to free them up to get back to their day jobs. We'd like to recognize the staff at the Lane Event Center for their effort to ensure a successful and fun fair this year. Thanks to their careful planning and event management, we set a record attendance for Saturday with 26,500 people. A couple other facts, 112,700 people attended the fair. That was up 4,000 over last year. There were record carnival sales. There were record food and beverage sales. There was increased group sales, concert revenue, and exhibit entries. There was 22,650 pounds of food collected for Food for Lane County. 2,997 units of blood were collected during the Pint for a Pass promotion, equating to 8,991 lives saved. The planning for the fair is a year-round effort. It's the largest event planned and hosted by Lane County each year and represents a tradition going back well over 100 years. Without the efforts of each person at Lane Event Center, we should not have this fun, family-friendly event each year. It truly does fit with our value, a passion to serve. I do believe we have Dale Bonston, operations worker. And I'm going to ask folks to come on up and at least stand with us. Emily Bohl, sales coordinator. Ron Eggleston, events coordinator. Philip Highwood, operations supervisor. Tim Jenkins, senior operations worker. Cindy Keller-Dyckhoff, office assistant 2. Lurleen Madrigal, the fair coordinator. Jean Miller, operations worker. Anali Silvis, marketing assistant. And I understand, but let me test this, Dean Bennett, senior operations worker, and Travis Silke, maintenance specialist lead, were not able to make it today.
That is correct.
Okay. Corey?
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioners, Chair. Appreciate this opportunity. I have the opportunity throughout the year on a couple of occasions to sit with you guys and talk about this event and the things that go on at this event and, you know, what it means to us. But what it really means to us and these people standing back here that work on this from the ground up, they work on it throughout the year. They have a lot of pride and passion in what they go through and put on for this county and this event. Everything from the relationship with the people that attend the fair along with our partners. So every food vendor, every person that's exhibiting at the fair are all our partners, and they spend countless hours working behind the scenes to make, to make those experiences a positive experience and to put on a great event. So I really appreciate this opportunity to thank them. The work that they do makes my job very easy, and it's with very much appreciation that I'd like to make sure that they get the credit for all this work. So I thank you for that opportunity. Rachel.
I'd just like to second everything that Corey just said. there are not very many of us, and we love what we do. Many of us have been there for a very long time. We take pride in the event, and it's a pleasure to do what we do, so we appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. So do you have
We have the certificates. We'll hand these
Yeah.
out. We'll let you continue on with public comment. We're going to take a little time in the back of the room, and
Okay.
we'll be able to hand this out.
very good,
Grab a
and
couple
Ms.
photos.
Ms. Ashbridge is here to take your photo, and thank you. And just let me say, I just really appreciate everything that's done to make this fair an exciting community event. It's obviously one of the largest events, single events in Lane County, and like a third of the population of Lane County attends this event. That's a pretty big number, and we really appreciate all your hard work. If other commissioners want to make some remarks, that'd be great, too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And looking around the room, you know, the poetry in motion that you experience when you look behind the scenes of the operation of the fair is remarkable. I had a chance to see it before hours, after hours, and significantly how you reviewed the day, the previous day of the fair, to make adjustments as to how that particular day was going to go. I had a chance to experience that, and it really is, it's an amazing feat that you pull off. On the Sunday of the fair, I took my family, and for the price of 8 cans of chili, we all got in there. It was a particularly hot day, and the experience was amazing. It really felt like the best. I'm from Tillamook, which has a great county fair, but I feel that this is the best county fair that I've ever seen in Lane County or anyplace else this year. So very beautifully done. And significantly, at the end of the day, when it was so hot, the afternoon, we all went back to the Public Works area, and we stood in the shade tents and played the games back there, and what a perfect ending to a perfect day. So thank you very much for all of the work that goes into it. It's, for folks who see the fair operating as smoothly as it does, that don't know how much work does go in. So thank you.
I went twice with my 5-year-old. We had a fantastic time. It was packed, but not so much so that you couldn't, get on a ride and enjoy the time that you were there. I can only imagine all the hard work that you've been doing in the background, and you are appreciated. Thank you.
I went twice, but because I'm senile, each time it was a whole new experience. Well, I'm sorry. I would like to extol your virtues for 15 minutes so you all can stand up there and absolutely enjoy having all the attention go to you. But it sounds like you broke pretty much every record in the book.
Enough of them to keep us on our toes, yeah.
Congratulations. And it sounds like your staff is so good, we don't need to pay your expenses any longer. Forgive my sense of humor. Congratulations to everybody. Sincerely,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope those photos go really good with all those big numbers. Thank you. So now we'll turn to our public comment, and I have our sign-up sheet here. I'll just start going down the list. When I call your name, come up to the front of the room. If there's nobody watching in the seat there or in the podium, then just go up to the podium. Our vice chair will be timing you, and so your light will go on, a green light will go on, and you'll have 3 minutes to give your name and address, and then make your public comment. Your yellow light comes on, I think, at 30 seconds to go, and your red light comes on at the end of the 3-minute period. So Steve Coatsworth, Misty Frost, Martha Bryson, Andre Scully, Linda Perrine. How many of those folks are here? Come forward in the sequence I just announced: Steve Coatsworth, Misty Frost, Martha Bryson, Audrey Scully, Linda Perrine. Welcome.
Thank you. Get me set up. Hopefully it's not counting against my time here yet. I prepared a couple of comments. Oh, I said I prepared a couple comments so I don't go off the rails here. So So my name's Steve Coatsworth, and I have a more longitudinal view of the job and housing markets here in Lane County, having been priced out of so many homes myself. You know, some people decide what they want to be, and then they'll globetrot and go wherever they have to go do that. But I've always known that this is my home and this is where I want to be. And I've worked a million different jobs to make sure that I get to stay here. I've served your tables. I've built the roofs of your houses and poured concrete for your driveways. I've cared for your children and your elderly. I've sung and danced for you at OFAM and OCT and elsewhere. I've even worked campaigns, I think, for all 4 of you. I did. I campaigned my ass off for a decade so that you could sit here in this room to help people like me, my friends, and my family. And we need you. I took off work today, work that I need to pay a rent that's been rising far faster than my wages have, because I wanted to remind you of that and to ask you to do something. And to remind you that this isn't pie in the sky stuff. If you look at new public housing in Utah and Florida, it's helped save people while simultaneously freeing up money in their budgets because they spend it on the front end rather than the back end. If you're worried that taking bold action might lose you your job here, and I know something about losing a job, I'm here to tell you that bold, creative work that shows that you give even half a damn about us will get you the respect, the reverence, and even re-election. I also think voters will be more open palm about housing judges when we see you housing people. More people lose their homes every month, and you all have the power to change that, so please do that. I have to go build a roof right now in Corvallis, a place where they're actually building housing. But before I do, I ask you to do something quickly and do something real, and to get us housing that we can afford. What FDR said in his time is as true today as it is in his time as it is in ours. The country needs and it demands bold and persistent experimentation. It's common sense to take a method and try it, and if it fails, admit it frankly and try something else. But above all, try something. We need enthusiasm, imagination, and the ability to face facts bravely. We need to correct by drastic means, if necessary, the faults in our economic system from which we now suffer. And yours is the task of remaking the world before you. May we be granted the courage, the faith, and the vision to do just that. So thanks for your heart, your courage, and your time.
Thank you. Misty Frost, Martha Bryson, welcome.
Hi, good morning. My name is Misty Frost, and I live in the River Road community. I'm on the board of directors for River Road and El Rapa, but I'm not representing those groups at this time, or Beyond Toxics, who is my employer. Recently, I had a conversation with a very privileged woman that lives in South Eugene, and she was very concerned about her Airbnbs being regulated. And we had lengthy discussion, but I was like, well, what about our community? We have a housing shortage. Please, what about families in need? And she said, there isn't a community here. There's just riffraff. And as a community organizer, and I've lived here for 20 years, there is a community. And speaking to all the community members, they are reaching out to you, to me, we're reaching out to each other to lean on each other, but we're really needing you guys to step up and do something about this crisis that has hit our communities so hard. Thank you.
Thank you. Martha Bryson, welcome.
Do you want to just come here? It might be easier to. I think so.
Good morning. My name is Martha Bryson. I am a 64-year-old woman who lost her housing 2 years ago in Springfield, and I ran into lots of barriers. I signed up for what few programs that I am income eligible for in subsidized housing. And meanwhile, I lived in a 30-year-old RV that had no running water and no heat, and my wheelchair had to be locked up outside in a downtown Springfield mobile home park that I didn't feel safe in, that there were many meth heads in, and I struggled. Then the mice moved in, and I was so traumatized. I had to drag myself around on forearm crutches while I lived in that motel. I mean, in that motorhome, that RV. 11 days ago, when I knew that I was not going to be housed, the wait lists were too long, and I couldn't compete in the regular rental market because more and more, they now have a new twist. You now have to have a 600-plus credit score. Mine 0, has no dings on it, nothing negative, but mine is 0, so I couldn't even apply in the regular rental market. They also require you to have 3 times the rent in income, and my income is $1,955 in Social Security. $500 of that right off the bat goes to medical expenses every month for me to survive. And so that brings it down to $1,450. And if you have to have 3 times the rent, do the math. There isn't anything that cheap here. So the next day, after I realized I was not going to get rehoused, someone reached out, a stranger, the kindness of strangers, heard my story over the last 6 months, be sharing bits and pieces of it on various Facebook pages about Eugene and Springfield homeless, and he convinced his landlord, his property manager, to bypass 35 applicants to rent to me. I got the call at 9:30 in the morning that you can have the apartment if you come up with a co-signer that makes 5 times the rent in income, because you're only $145 short of being 3 times the rent in income. Plus, you have to come up with a $700 deposit in order, so I don't even interview those other 35 applicants. And I called the man who had convinced his landlord, his property management company, to rent to me and said, I'm going to have to decline. And I was going for tests for shortness of breath at Riverbend, and he said, don't decline. Let me make some calls. He called the Christian Science Church in Eugene, and some philanthropy-minded person wrote a check and took it for the deposit, and instantly I was housed in an apartment that my wheelchair can go through the front door, and I can use it in the living room, but it can't go through the doorway for me to get to my bedroom. But at least I'm indoors in a building. It is too much rent. It's $775. It's going to cut into my food budget, but I'm housed until my name comes up on the wait list for Village Oaks through Homes for Good. And by the way, Homes for Good normally has 180 vacancies or turnovers per year. In 2018, they had 130. And we desperately need income-based affordable housing. I don't want to hear about affordable housing for people who make $50,000 a year. I don't want to hear about low-income housing, because oftentimes those are tax credit properties, and where they are below the regular rental market, they are not affordable for seniors and disabled people living on Social Security. Okay? I'm pretty sure my time is up. But
Thank
I will
you.
tell you, I've been a housing activist since 1989, the Housing Now March on Washington, and quite frankly, I'm very pissed that I'm still working on the same issues, asking for the same 12 measures we asked for in 1989, and the powers that be did not listen. Please, we need this housing bond, and we need the money spent to fund lots of different housing choices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andre Scully. Okay. Audrey.
Hi, my name's Audrey.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
I live in Eugene. My story is slightly different from hers. I moved to Eugene about 4 years ago. I don't have much family that's healthy to be around. I was leaving a 5-year extremely abusive relationship. He served me with a status quo order and a petition for custody when I left. And his family had money, and I had nobody but myself. So he got custody, and now I'm losing 62% of my paycheck for child support. Working 2 jobs, I still do not have enough to live on at all. I've got lucky when I first moved here. I had lots of friends here. One of them was working for an apartment manager. They got me hooked up with an apartment. But literally it was 80% of my income. And I was going lots of time without eating throughout the month, just so that way I could save up what little bit of money I had to go pick up my kids on the weekend and be able to feed them. And then winter came, and I've been on my own since I was 16. I've always worked. I lost one of my jobs that winter. I, for the first time in my life, got an eviction notice on the 24th of December, just before Christmas. And I have always worked since I was 16 and taken care of myself and paid rent. And now I'm in such a predicament that, like, working 2 jobs, my take home is enough that I don't qualify for any kind of assistance anywhere. But what I'm actually bringing home after child support, after taxes, everything else is far below the poverty line. And so with these struggles has caused even more struggles. So then I ended up renting a room from somebody off of Craigslist. I paid 3 months in advance, and then my car broke down. And right after I paid 3 months in advance and my car broke down, I was attacked in the middle of the night by this random person who, that was the only option of where I could stay. I had to leave at 4 a.m. under police escort. I had nowhere to go. I was on the streets and still working. And it took me 7 months of still working and being on the streets to save up enough money to get into a place again. It's been real rough, and by the time I did get into a place again, it was the same thing. I was renting a room from somebody because this was my only option. And there, because of that and my not being on the lease, there's a power dynamic there that became way out of control. And I was not respected within the household, and it came for my safety again that I must leave. And then I was homeless again. I've spent about a complete year's time homeless on the streets of Eugene while working, while, trying to save up money and trying to pay rent and trying to eat and trying to get by. Like, there has got to be housing that is affordable and income-based. There are so many people that are working, but they're not making enough to pay their way in this world, no matter how much they work. And it's really, really hard. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Okay, Linda Perrine, Jason Gonzalez, Dave Piccioni.
Good morning, I'm Linda Perrine. I'm in Heather Buck's district. I wanted to start, I have 3 topics this morning. I wanted to start with thanking the county and the Department of Forestry for the effort on Mount Pisgah's fire last few days ago. I live on the south side, and I've got a front row seat to watch the Department of Forestry work on that fire. It took 3 helicopters with water bags filled out of the Coast Fork, and then finally planes with fire retardant to put the fire out. This is just symptomatic of the changing, drier climate that we're all having to deal with. I am a filbert grower on the south side, and I'm in good company around Lane County growing filberts during the dry season, and they're out there now, right now, mowing with flail mowers, All it takes is hitting a rock, and boom, you've got an ignition source. So I think these are issues we're going to have to start considering going forward on, how we're going to manage mowing and things like that, which I hear the mowing is the issue with the Pisgah fire. Secondly, 350 Eugene is involved in planning a student strike on September 20th. I wanted to let you know that. We're working with U of O students and some of the local high school students, and they are considering ideas like holding their own council meeting and listing the demands that they have for climate action. We may be in touch with you all to possibly use Harris Hall, this room, for them to hold that council meeting on the 20th, and so we'll get in touch with you over email if we want to go forward with that. And then finally, we had a very good first meeting with Dan Hurley and his staff, and we discussed a wide range of topics on the climate action planning effort. And we'll be back this afternoon to hear Dan's report. And, one of the things that we talked about there is the county. He's got a phase 1 and phase 2 approach, the phase 2 approach being much broader look at the county. I think it's going to take all of us looking outside the box of what the typical county services and staff work on to address climate change. And on that note, we are going to suggest and offer you a tour of some sustainable forestry land coming up possibly in October. And we want to offer the staff and the commissioners a chance to take a tour of some of the more sustainable forest management that is going on in the county. And I'm going to leave the more discussion on that to Jason Gonzalez here following me. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gonzalez, welcome, followed by Dave Piccioni and Chris McAllister.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners, Chair Sorensen. Thanks for having me today. My name's Jason Gonzalez, and I reside in Walton. My commissioner's not here today. Might be for the better. Welcome to the new commissioners, Buck and Bernie, who have never testified before. Before. That's a double. Sorry about that. I work with Oregon Wild here, and everybody on the commission is familiar with my organization, I believe. Some of you had more opportunity to interact with my colleagues than myself. I work on state forest policy issues, and I'm a community organizer. I work all throughout rural Oregon, but mostly focused in the western counties and the coast and coast range, from about Port Orford up to Astoria and inland throughout the industrial forest lands. My expertise is really in helping those folks organize locally when they have concerns about the impacts of industrial forestry on their drinking watersheds, on their backyard forests, and on their communities. In that work, I also am really fortunate to work with a lot of really excellent foresters, folks who are resisting the status quo industrial model to really try new things, to try old things, to try growing healthy forest ecosystems and not tree farms, to try looking at how soils store carbon, how trees store carbon, how forest fires and forests interact, and most importantly maybe, because it ties to all those other things, how industrial logging impacts streams. I've heard that the city planner, the county planner, or the county climate planning process, there's some concern about if the county can look at forests, what kind of jurisdiction the county might have. But I'd like to kind of encourage a line of thinking that I heard early up here this morning, which is that we need creative, bold solutions. We need leaders who are willing to think outside the box, who are willing to push boundaries, who are willing to look for ways to make any kind of change you can at the level that you can. As somebody who works on state forest policy, I'm well aware of jurisdictional restrictions when it comes to how we look at our forests. But because of that, I'm also well aware that there's areas that you can look at that. And I just want to encourage the commission to consider that, to look at the options. I think there's a lot of ways that the county can offer support for better forestry going forward, to support long-term jobs in our communities, to support a future forestry that works in the coming climate, to face the realities of what the past has done to today. I think there's a lot that we can look at as a county. I think that we could look at supporting local requests from organizations to put these kinds of questions before voters. I think you could look at doing things like supporting efforts for state change in a more formal way. But I also would really love to show you around some of the foresters that I work with, folks who aren't represented by the industrial lobbyist associations. And I'd like for you to hear from them about things that they could use from you. We talk a lot in my line of work about sticks, but I'd like to show you all some areas that I think that you could put a carrot out. I think that the county has a really great opportunity to encourage sustainable forestry in the way that most of us view the word sustainable. And so you'll be hearing from us, from Oregon Wild and 350, an invite to commissioners and staff to come on a tour. We can set everything up, make it easy, work with your schedules, and get it figured out. And I'd really encourage you to keep an eye out for that invite and try to attend. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Okay, Dave Piccioni. Welcome.
Hi. I agree that we have to protect the forests and that having a tree plantation is not the same as a forest that has a lot of elements interacting with each other. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about is doesn't even have to leave this room to be talked about. I'm sorry to say that before the break there was a meeting and I apologize because I wasn't aware of what was discussed about this the week before. But something that a lot of environmentalists had approved had been passed forward, and we just needed to talk a little bit about it. And unfortunately, Commissioner Farr started describing things about that weren't really relevant about this. And soon after, all the other commissioners except Butch were chiming in, and that was our time. It was our time to give our testimony. And you guys took up half an hour of that. I left at 9:30, and that was about the time when, after a little rowdy noise from the back, you guys realized that you had gone too far and that we needed some testimony. Another thing that I want to say is these guys that come here to talk to get approval for things, I saw that after they were done, some of them were moving over there to sit down and listen into to what was being talked about. But it appeared like the more the bosses or whoever, the people in charge, kind of like kept walking and walked out. It seemed like some of the people that came here and got an award were interested in hearing what was being talked about by the public, but it doesn't. I mean, the dynamic of it was that the ones that wanted to stay weren't the ones in charge. So I think it would be really maybe positive if these awards are given after all the testimony. I mean, if the people don't want to listen to, if the guests don't want to listen to it, they can come in late. But so I guess that wouldn't be very good. But. Yeah, I just think that when people come here to receive awards, they should, if they're interested, hear and be allowed to participate in the conversations that are going on after them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Chris McAllister, followed by Jim New, Richard Hughes.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Chris McAllister, and I come from Springfield. I come before you with a couple points of consideration and some solutions to suggest. First, I'd like to start with a quote from SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. Being homeless, no matter how long it lasts, is a life-altering traumatic event that creates major stress in any person's life, regardless of age. 90% of the people I helped out at 99 are still on the street or back in worse situations. This is not through the fault of the system so much because they're trying and it's maxed out. Our system's not just prepared to be able to handle the amount of need that has to happen now. We need safe places. We need places for people to get basic needs like toiletry and showering. One of the biggest barriers to cleanliness and healthiness is access to water. We can't even go to businesses without having bought something, and even then, if you buy something, that doesn't even guarantee bathroom access. I spent yesterday cleaning up as a volunteer 9 sites of human feces downtown as a service to make sure that we have something going on until we open up these public bathrooms. We were offered 3 by the city of Eugene for $120,000. We are offered minimal options for high prices, and we have high expectations for things that are normal. With that in mind, I'd like to ask that we work on now. Operation Now, needs on wings. We need it here, not today, but yesterday. We need you to be brave. There's a theme, though it's not intentional, but I came to ask you to be brave. I have the opportunity and the honor to work behind the Boy Scout office on the Armory to help people do some operations coming up in this next year. But we need people to actually be brave and ask the questions that need to be asked, have the work sessions that need to happen. We need to have a work session on an emergency clause. We need to have a work session on an ordinance that can be enacted by an emergency clause. And I know that Commissioner Bozovich has said that he would be willing to look at that topic. I ask that people support him in that option and actually explore this. We need to be able to activate our people. We need to challenge NIMBY with yes. There have been times in our history where this state has rejected people, whether they are Japanese people who've been put in internment camps, whether they are African Americans or black people who were kept from this state due to our history. We have a history of exclusion people because we want, because we feel. We need to do what's right. We need to do it now. And I really am thankful for this body for giving us the courage to be able to act. I ask that with no uncertain terms that you give and request clear and objective outcomes from your staff. Challenge them to think outside the box. Challenge them to make right. Our people need you. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim New, followed by Richard Hughes, followed by Sabra Markcroft. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Commissioners, my name is Jim New. I live in Mr. Bozovich's area. Lane County is about to undertake measures to enact a climate action plan. Part of the plan will establish a community greenhouse gas emission inventory, part of which will be from stationary source measured in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. Oregon facilities with an air quality permit subject to DEQ mandatory greenhouse gas reporting rules are reflected in annual updates of biogenic and anthropogenic emissions data. According to the 2017 Greenhouse Gas Facility Emission Chart for Lane County, International Paper, Kingsford Manufacturing, Lane County Short Mountain Landfill, Seneca Biomass Electric Power Generation and Mill, Flakeboard Reconstituted Wood Products, Murphy Plywood, Swanson Veneer, Roseboro Veneer, and University of Oregon all surpassed 25,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. 19 other industrial companies emitted more than 2,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. Title 25, Section 35 of the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency Stationary Source Testing and Monitoring states LRAPA may require owner-operator of a source to provide emission testing facilities, and testing must be conducted in accordance with the DEQ source sampling manual. As part of the county climate action plan, a source risk assessment should be established at these gross polluting corporations. Fence line monitoring should be required by any polluter of 2 metric tons of carbon dioxide emitted per year, with monthly evaluations by a private air monitoring service at the company's expense. A source risk assessment would address environmental justice issues such as polluters need to engage with impacted communities about the impact their emissions are exposing to their airshed and the public's health, protecting toxic risk values for children's health. Children's capacity to oppose health risks from air toxins is more difficult than adults, leading to acute and chronic illnesses. Low income and people of color are disproportionately exposed to these largest polluters. The county climate action plan must take air monitoring, source risk assessment, and environmental justice into consideration as part of the Health and Social Service chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Richard Hughes, Sabra Markroff and Steve Deere. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Richard Hughes. I'm in Commissioner Sorensen's district. And currently, I'm proponent of the Willamette Valley Scenic Bikeway and also an advisor with Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. I'm here in support of the community preferred alternative to the improvements on Territorial Highway that are proposed. I just wanted to point out that the Travel Oregon did a study back almost 10 years ago, which indicated there's more than $400 million annually spent by cyclists. In fact, cyclists spend 19 times more than the average person visiting by car when they visit by bike. So there's no doubt that this report, once updated, will be more than double that 400 million amount. And if approved, Territorial Highway could become very popular with cyclists and also an economic stimulus to the community there. I just wanted to point that out. So thank you.
Thank you. Sabra Markroff, followed by Steve Deere, followed by Majeska Seascreen.
Hi, my name is Sabra Markroft. I live off West 18th Avenue, close to Chambers in Eugene. First off, I want to urge you to support the housing bond. It's vitally important. I would love to see it much bigger than it is. 4J recently had a bond measure that passed that was much larger. And where are our families going to live to have their children in our schools? But what I'm mostly here for today is to advocate for leaving the door open for community land trusts and housing cooperatives. These are two vehicles. They're different things, but they can be used together. A community land trust holds land in trust to use for community-friendly purposes, like affordable housing. A limited equity housing cooperative holds property and manages a site. The co-op enables the people who live on the property to own a stake in their housing, even though they cannot qualify for a mortgage and do not have money for a down payment. The two together create a way that low-income people can have affordable housing for them that's income-based, that works, but without long-term government subsidy. The method by which this happens is a little complicated. Square One Villages is a great place to look for more information. They're currently developing a model of a combination community land trust and limited equity co-op that will be eligible for funding such as an affordable housing bond. So as you're planning to use this money, please work with people in our community that are developing new and innovative, at least around here. There are other places that are already doing it. Models for making affordable housing that doesn't require ongoing subsidy and doesn't go away in a specified number of years. It's not a support for a developer. It's permanent, income-based affordable housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Steve Deere, followed by Majeska Seascreen, followed by Claire Roth.
Good morning. My name is Steve Deere. I live in Elmira. Support the housing bond and hold the joint work session on Ariel Spring. On the bond, housing is a human right. As such, housing is a community responsibility. Support the housing bond proposal. Yesterday, I was headed home on 11th Avenue, and I picked up a hitchhiker. He was headed to the coast. He was leaving Eugene. His name is Zach. Zach was born in Eugene some 20-odd years ago. He had volunteered at a mental health clinic in Eugene. He said he had suffered mental health problems himself, and Zach is homeless now. He described how his backpack had been stolen one too many times, his backpack with just a change of clothes and a bottle of water. Eugene is a mean community, he told me. There are more people like this thoughtful young man than many of us really realize, more than our statistics describe. Zach has a lot to offer our community. Zach is a loss for our community. This proposed bond initiative is a partial solution. Bold policy efforts like this have been too rare. I urge you to launch this process for an income-based public housing bond now. Also, I'm reminding you that there is strong support for a joint working session on aerial spraying of lethal poisons on our people, our land, our flora, and fauna. Include legal representatives for all parties. It's been a while since all four of you expressed agreement with this proposal towards a solution. Please make this happen now. Thirdly, since I have a few seconds, please do everything 350 Eugene asks of you, and as well as Community Rights Lane County and Extinction Rebellion Eugene ask of you. Your lives, our lives depend on it. Thank you.
Okay, Majeska Cease Green, followed by Claire Roth and Rob Zako.
Hello, Majeska Cease Green. My address is in Eugene. I haven't been here for a while, and it's good to be here. Thanks for hearing the public. And I'm reminded once again of what a great county we live in, how many really great and creative people we have living here, and the possibilities with our officials, such as you. I came out today because of the proposal for a bond measure for housing, and I'm not sure what it would be for. I came to learn more about it, and unfortunately I was able to learn a little bit more before this meeting was called to order. One thing I think you all know that I've been involved in the housing and homelessness issue for a while. I'm very much in support of finding new ways to get revenue from the broader community for the many very great needs for funding. I would join others and say, please make sure any bond is helping the very lowest income or no income people in the community to have truly affordable housing, income-based affordable housing, among other things that I understand a bond measure could be used for. I also, I learned that this bond measure is being proposed for the November 2020 ballot, which makes me feel it has more possibilities of success than if it were, as I had thought, for this coming November's election. It seems to me there's a great deal of work that needs to be done in this community to get enough unity to have a bond measure actually pass at the ballot, and to have people feel good about what it's going to be used for. So I understand there hasn't been a public process yet. That's one of the things that was kind of confusing for me, because I've been following the Poverty and Homelessness Board and other things and realizing forever that we need to have something like a bond measure, and knew it was being sort of talked about in the back rooms or something, I'm not sure where. But now it's obviously becoming an emergency situation. I also support the idea of the county and the cities declaring an emergency for housing and homelessness, because I think a whole lot of us know that that is the situation, and some things need to be streamlined so that they can be dealt with more easily, which an emergency declaration would help for. But I want to say it's time now to start a public process for a bond measure for revenue, for uses that our broader community can truly support for affordable housing, income-based. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Claire Roth, followed by Rob Zako, and another sheet coming this way.
Good morning, Board of County Commissioners, and thank you for hearing us all today. My name is Claire Roth, and I'm here representing Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. I'm here to also express my support in the community preferred alternative of the territorial highway proposal. This project will not only assist the immediate community around the project area, but also those many other folks who enjoy visiting that area. On May 31st, 2006, experienced cyclist Jane Higdon was tragically killed after being struck by a truck while cycling on Territorial Road. The safety improvements outlined under the Territorial Highway proposal will help to prevent tragedies such as this and the loss of Jane's life. Thank you.
Okay, Rob Zako, followed by Steve Piercy, followed by Rob Dickinson.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Rob Zako. I'm happy to see you this morning. Pete Sorensen is my commissioner. I'm Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. We bring people together to promote safe transportation options, safe streets, and walkable neighborhoods. And I'm here to support, as Claire, my colleague, did, the Territorial Highway community design concept. I want to take you back, though, 4 years ago to 2015. Back then, BEST was supporting transit, and that's what we did. And we were doing transit stuff. And then we got the news in February of 2015 that a pickup truck driver had run a red light in Springfield at 54th and Main and hit a family. The mother survived, the 3 kids did not. And BEST looked around to see who in our community is working on making our streets safe for everyone. And Mothers Against Drunk Driving have been doing amazing work, but in that particular case, there was no alcohol involved. We didn't see anybody else. And so we began educating ourselves. We learned about something called Vision Zero, or Towards Zero Deaths, which is the idea that all lives matter, that every life is valuable no matter how you choose to get around. And we want a community that is safe where you don't die just going to pick up something from the store. We later learned, sadly, as you may know, that Lane County for a number of years has had the dubious distinction of having more traffic deaths than any other county in Oregon. We began our work focused on Eugene and Springfield and urban issues, but the reality is that more people are dying on our roads in rural areas than in urban areas. It's more people driving cars than biking. It's people, road departures, and so forth. You know all this. You've adopted a transportation system plan 2 years ago that prioritizes safety as your #1 goal. Thank you for doing that. You also know that we have a number of tools to address these safety issues. People need to take personal responsibility. They need to make good choices. They need to be educated. We need law enforcement to remind them to do that. But ultimately, we have to have a transportation system that's safe for everyone. And Territorial Highway is, as it's currently designed, not safe for a lot of people. I've driven along there, I've biked along there, and it's too narrow, it's too windy, there's just not enough room. What your staff has done is they brought forward a proposal to fix that, to provide wide shoulders, to allow bicyclists to not interfere with cars, for cars to pass, and so forth. Your staff's doing great work. You're going to approve it, I hope. Just want to endorse that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, Steve Piercy, followed by Rob Dickinson.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Steve Piercy. I live in Eugene, and Commissioner Sorensen is my commissioner. Sue Wolling spoke at the track hearing on July 24, where the proposal for Territorial Highway was under consideration. Sue is unable to be here today, but she shared her comments with me so that I can repeat her message for you today. I am a bicyclist, a member of the Gears Cycling Club, and a volunteer for the Blackberry Bramble bicycling event that brings hundreds of people to Lane County to ride routes, including Territorial Highway. I urge you to approve the community-preferred alternative for Territorial Highway with 6-foot shoulders, 11-foot travel lanes, and softening of curves between Gillespie Corners and Lorraine. Bicyclists have always known how dangerous a road Territorial Highway is. The lack of shoulders, blind curves, and recurrent pavement failures make everyone nervous and lead to conflicts between road users. And so, while Jane Higdon's death in 2006 was certainly tragic, it really was not surprising. Everyone knows that could easily have been me. Yet we continue to ride on Territorial. Why? simply because it is the only way to reach some of the best cycling Oregon has to offer. We ride Territorial to go to Cottage Grove, to reach Siaslaw River Road and Wolf Creek, to Ham Road, and to Drain. These are all wonderful bicycling routes, and the only way to reach them is to ride on Territorial. So we cross our fingers and hope for the best. So I'm delighted to hear of real plans to fix Territorial, and I was equally happy to learn that the folks who live down there are just as concerned about the road as we are, and they agree with us. This is not a case of bicyclists against motorists or property owners. We're all just trying to stay alive. That's why there has been so much interest in this project, and I appreciate the robust public involvement that has been part of developing the plan. The problem on Territorial is not bad driving or bad bicycling. Granted, we've probably all seen a few people who get kind of territorial about their space on the road, but this is really not about behavior. It's simply a dangerous road. I don't think any of us really knows how we would respond if we were driving past a bicyclist and then a big vehicle suddenly came at us around a blind curve and there wasn't room for everybody. It's hard to know what any of the three people would do, but it wouldn't be very pretty. There's no safe option with a narrow roadway. We simply need a road that has more room for bicyclists, better visibility around curves, a durable and smooth road surface, and a design that controls speed while maintaining the beauty of the area. I think the community preferred alternative is that option. In 2017, Lane County adopted its Transportation Safety Action Plan with the goal of preventing traffic fatalities and serious injuries. Territorial Highway is a perfect place to put that plan into action. There are others, and we'd be glad to talk about them sometime, but let's start here.
Thank you so much for your public comment.
Thank you.
All right. Rob Dickinson. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. I'm Rob Dickinson from unincorporated Cottage Grove. I'm here today to speak on the aerial spray ban and local self-government ballot measures. We're here to call on the commissioners to take action on these measures, to refer them to the voters in the 2020 election. We've been coming here for the better part of 2 years now, I think, urging action on this, and it's time for us to get going. At the June 18th public comments meeting, I believe there was consensus among the board to actually hold a joint work session. And we need to get that scheduled as soon as possible. At the July 23rd meeting, we were hoping that that meeting the schedule would happen for the work session, but it didn't. At that time, the commissioners voted to release to the public the internal memorandum on the supposed legal liability of commissioners in doing the referral. We want to commend you on doing that, releasing that memo. That was important to do. It was a good step so that we could actually respond to the arguments made there. Which we have done. I think we've provided all the commissioners and the county council and the county administrator a number of different analyses from our attorney. And in fact, which I think largely rebuts the county council's argument that there is some sort of liability on the part of commissioners. In fact, one of the first parts of that analysis says the whole concept of public official liability for voting to adopt laws or even put measures on the ballot is unfounded. It goes on to cite a whole range of legal cases in which that is explicitly countered. In fact, there's U.S. Supreme Court precedent, especially the main case is Bogan versus Scott Harris, which says that legislators are absolutely immune from liability for their legislative acts. That is the basis of a whole legal doctrine around that, where a whole number of cases, including Oregon cases like Kitsabr versus Cascadia Wildlands, that shows that that is not the case. In fact, the substantial portion of County Council's memorandum, the first 6 or 7 or 8 pages, was really analyzing something we didn't even ask you to do, which was about if you were to refer charter amendments. We've explicitly said that's not what we're asking you to do for a whole long time. We're asking you to refer an ordinance version of what we did before, which would not have those issues. But the whole notion of commissioner's liability is unfounded. And in fact, I think there has not been a single instance of a government official being found liable in any way for putting a measure on the ballot or for expending public funds to place a measure on the ballot. And we're still calling on the county council to show us some cases where this has actually occurred, because that's really being used as a bogus argument. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else that has not signed up for public comment? Okay. Thank you very much for your public comment today. And yeah, we do have a time certain at 10 o'clock. But shortly after that, I'd like to go back to our remonstrances. So at this time, I'll call up item 8.
Is there any way we can do remonstrances quickly now? Just
Yeah, we can all do our.
If that's okay with our time.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, let's do the remonstrances. Go ahead.
Okay. Excuse me. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We had a good variety of interesting subjects coming forth. I wanted to really probably hone in on the housing bond concept. So this housing bond concept has been around for several years. I know in my circle, before I've been in this particular position, it's been discussed 3-4 years ago. Conceptually speaking, the first few years, we were trying to see what was happening in Portland, as they were the first to go into a housing bond for the community, and there were a lot of kinks to work out, and I think we saw that through the legislative cycle and fixes, and I think finally there's probably a basis of a concept that could be adopted in some fashion. You know, it is important to make bold, quick action. A bond is not necessarily a quick action, though, but it is a necessary discussion to have, and I'm very interested in having that discussion on the board. And we haven't brought it up ourselves yet. It's really been the public who's been reaching out recently and being more vocal about what we could possibly do. And I would very much like the board to discuss that further. And when I've asked and was invited to the mayor's roundtable, it was presented to the mayors, you know, what would it, if there was one, what would it look like in your communities? And as I have 7 of the 12 cities in my particular district, the majority, all but one, the portion of Eugene, are all small rural communities. They have fundamentally different housing needs than the Metro Center. And I think it's really important, if we do discuss a housing bond, that we make sure that they have an equitable voice, an equitable outcome in whatever that may be. And I can expand on that when we do get to that discussion, but I just want to make that very clear that if this is something that we pursue, I'm going to be advocating strongly for those rural communities to make sure that their voices are heard, and that if funding becomes available, that is equitably distributed throughout our county.
Okay, other commissioners with remonstrances? Yep, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your indulgence to the 10 o'clock time certain. I'll be very, very brief indeed. You know, providing income-based housing is going to be one of our greatest tools in addressing the housing crisis that Misty Hughes stated so eloquently, the crisis that has hit our community so hard. A lot of things to say to a lot of folks right now. I will respond more when we have more time, but significantly, people in the room who have been advisors of mine for quite some time. Sabra, you've been around a long time giving me advice. Chris, you've been around a long time giving me advice, and Jessica. But none exceed Steve Coatsworth, who's been giving me advice since he was 6 years old and continues to do so. So thank you very much for being here today, and I look for more comment.
First, this particular commissioner appreciates the nature of busy staff having things to do and time certain items on the agenda. But I also really think that public responses are more important. So I'm glad that Commissioner Buck asked that we do this immediately. I would like to say that I think the greatest detriments to adequate housing for all income levels is our war budget, are the tax cuts to the rich that have recently even gone further, racism, environmental issues, and I think that we all need to remember that, because the enemy is not us or you or our neighbors, those with or those without. The enemy is really the distribution of wealth and resources and opportunities that we enjoy, which in my brief life have gone the wrong direction, right now anyway. So within that, I would also like to say very quickly that I don't know what people have heard. There is no housing bond. There is no thing. There is no yet there. I think every one of these commissioners agree with you that there ought to be, that we need to be pretty deliberate in defining how we can get something approved, that we need to ensure that while we're all here together discussing crumbs, that we also attach it to a vision of housing for everyone. I could go on a soapbox. I apologize. I appreciate very much all of the issues that everyone has brought in public comment. I encourage us all not to be angry, because this seems to be an angry place as we all are frustrated with the lack of action on the particular issue which is touching and impeding our lives. That's why I became, after 66 years of being an unofficial, a public official, nothing is moving fast enough as far as I am concerned. And I think all of us here are working our hardest. We're with you. We want to define something. We want to put this on a ballot. But remember, it's an enlightened electorate which creates democracy. So we also need to ensure people are part of the process so that whatever is proposed is in fact approved. And I cannot thank all of you, and especially you, for your story. It was touching. Sometimes I have trouble keeping the tears in when we're listening to public comment. I know I've spoken too long. I apologize. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioners. I'll just say a few things. First of all, regarding our upcoming work session, my understanding is that's in the process of being scheduled right now. The Lane County Legal Counsel and our board coordinator are getting in touch with the proponent's attorney and the opponent's attorneys, and working out the schedule for that work session, which is going to be happening probably in early October. Secondly, regarding the good news about the progress on the climate change, I think all the reports I'm getting from both the staff and from the public advocates, it's going well. We're working on it. We're getting ready for our work sessions. There's a lot of good work being undertaken, and I'm really glad we're moving in that direction. As Commissioner Berney said, I got into public service because I didn't think things were moving fast enough, and they're still not moving fast enough as far as I'm concerned. But I'd like to say that's a bright spot, that we're turning a very large ship around, and hopefully we'll get on to doing something really significant in the climate change arena. Regarding the housing problem, and particularly the housing problem for poor people, the need, as shown in our public comment today, is huge. It's urgent. It's something that people that are going through it are scarred, and it affects their lives for the whole life, as well as the time they're going through it. And it seems to me that the board wants to move in the right direction. I think the difficulty is we don't have a good sense of public opinion of the topic. Commissioner Burney said something pretty significant, and that is we govern with the consent of those who are governed. We don't dictate things up here, and I believe that when we do have our work session on this, we need to really be focused on the assessment of how people in the community feel about parting with their tax dollar to fund the very important needs that we've heard identified here today. To me, that's really the focus. It's not on whether I think it's too big or too small. It's not what I think, okay? It's not what I think. It's not what any one of the commissioners think. It's what the public thinks. And so if there's support for it, and we can get on to that now and get an idea of the parameters of what people are willing to pay for a property tax supported bond, I'd like to get going on that. And in terms of how do we allocate the money, I'd like to figure out if we have any money to allocate. If we have money to allocate, then we can move on to a discussion of how do we make it as fair as possible between the various geography of Lane County. We know on the coast, we know there's people that are working 2 jobs, just has been announced by people that could come to public comment here today. They're working 2 jobs, and they can't afford to live in the community in which they're working. We know that's a problem on the entire Oregon coast. So we know that each community has different problems, whether it's Eugene, Springfield, downtown Eugene, West 11th, and all the rural communities. And it's very important, and thank you, Commissioner Buck, for going to the Lane County Mayor's meeting, because to me, involving the cities, the 12 cities in Lane County, making sure that their needs are recognized as we go through this process, really important. I think our work session really needs to be getting the answer to who could do this polling, how long would it take, who would pay for it, how our Health and Human Services staff would be coordinating that, and really get down to the brass tacks of whether or not there's support in the community for this. I think there is. I think the public realizes the nonprofit groups have been stretched to the breaking point, and there is no more nonprofit money. And that's why I think it's important that government step in. And I would be in favor of doing that as soon as we can. And when we have our work session, that'll be among my main questions, is not how much money do you want, or how much money are you going to be spending, or where are you going to be spending it? Because I want to make sure this money's spent. No, my focus will be on, is there public support for this? And if there is, let's keep moving. Okay. All right. All right. We are now ready to take up item 8B. Which is Mr. Solomon and your colleagues. You can come up to the table while I read this extensive agenda item. Item 8B, Order 19-08-20-16, in the matter of approving the 2019-2021 Measure 57 Intervention Program Budget Summary and delegating authority to the County Administrator to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the Department of Corrections and subcontracts for services. Paul Solomon is with us. He's Chair of the Public Safety Coordinating Council. With him is Susan Sowards, the Public Safety Coordinating Council Systems Analyst, and she works for the Lane Council of Governments, and where she is a Principal Criminal Justice Planner. And both of you are appreciated for all your hard work in this community and for the many years you've been doing it. I'll now turn it over to you to make your presentation.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, before we begin, my apologies. I do need to step away. Mike Finch from Tech Services will be joining you. As you know, I oversee the parole and probation function here at the county, and I have a prior engagement with an all-staff meeting. It should be no more than 30 minutes, and I will be back as soon as I possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Good morning, Chair Sorensen, Commissioners. Thank you for having us today. Today, we have the pleasure of presenting the budgets for the Grant and Aid Program, the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program, which I will refer to as the JRGP program to save time, and the Measure 57 Intervention Program. You have in front of you 3 separate orders to be adopted. Budgets for all 3 programs are included. Because of timing constraints, however, the CCA plan, which usually accompanies the grant and aid budget, is going to be on the agenda at some point in September as a consent calendar item. So we are really just focusing on the budgets here today. And while the budget packets are independent of one another, these programs are interdependent and make up the core of the county's community corrections funding. This budget also represents the harsh realities of the inadequate state funding that we are faced with right now. This was a very difficult session. There were some very disappointing numbers that came out of the legislature for the Grant and Aid Program. The Justice Reinvestment Grant Program funding remained pretty stable. But I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of a background on the Grant and Aid Program. Some of you may recall back in 1995, the legislature passed Senate Bill 1145, which gave the counties the responsibility of managing the adult population of parole and post-prison supervision folks. Parole and probation became a county department at the time. Parole violators were to be confined locally instead of going to prison. Individuals with sentences less than a year were to be held locally. Counties were required to create local public safety coordinating councils. The state created the Grant and Aid Program to provide funding for all of these services. And counties were granted local authority in determining the best use of their state funding. Historically, we've seen our percentage of the statewide allocation decrease significantly during the recession and rise incrementally in recent years, in large part because of the efforts of Lane County District Attorney Patty Perlow. And this first slide will give us a little bit of the growth that we've seen since 15. We actually kind of bottomed out in 15-17 when our percentage of the total statewide allocation dropped to 8.26%. Today it's up to 9.57%. And this is based on a snapshot the state does of everybody on supervision in each county. They do it in 2 different months of the year, and then they average that, and that becomes your percentage moving forward. Unfortunately, when we got the first numbers from the Department of Corrections as we were beginning the budget this year, the number they gave us was 9.85%. When we got the final number, it was 9.57%, which created about a $750,000 delta. So that was one piece we had to deal with right away, in addition to the overall pie shrinking considerably, which I'll talk about in a moment. The other thing I want to talk about is the cost study that was required by the legislature. ORS 423.486 requires the Department of Corrections in collaborations with the Oregon Association of Community Corrections Directors to submit an actual cost study to the legislature every 6 years. The purpose of which is to determine the actual cost and money spent for the 30,000 people on supervision in Oregon. This exhaustive 2-year process placed the new baseline funding for community corrections at $319 million. That's a far cry from the governor's recommended budget of $259 million and is significantly less than the $273 million that we received in the 17-19 biennium. Armed with cost study numbers and a belief that the legislature would likely fund some level of increase, the Budget Committee of the PSCC set about in the spring to work on 3 different budget scenarios, a low, medium, and a high, with the understanding that we didn't know whether the cost study would be funded. And our hope was that we would see some level of that cost study funding. Much to our dismay, much to the dismay of the Budget Committee, the legislature in the final days of session allocated $268 million to the Department of Corrections for the Grant and Aid program, totally ignoring the cost study. As a result, we were forced to work with our low scenario, which meant significant cuts. You have before you here a list of the programs that were cut to make the budget balance. So we lost 2.5 positions, or we didn't lose them. We have 2.5 positions in parole and probation that are being held open at a cost of over $500,000. 2 prosecutor positions were eliminated, but were later picked up in a county ad package that offset the reduction. But the total combined loss was over $950,000. Sex offender treatment was reduced by $77,000. Sobering station and detox beds were reduced by a combined $261,000. Community prosecution program that's run by the Center for Dispute Resolution was reduced by $40,000. And then we still had a $40,000 hole late in the day because of accounting by the Department of Corrections that adjusted our final allocation. So we had to reduce another $40,000, which we split up between the jail, parole and probation sponsors, and Lane Council of Governments to get a balanced budget. But our total program reductions were a little under $2 million. So now I'm going to move on to the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program. So JRI came about as a result of House Bill 3194, which was passed in the 2013 session. Prior to that, back in 2011, Governor Kulongoski commissioned a public safety task force to look at the alarming growth in our prison population. At that time, we were projected to need to add over 2,000 prison beds in the next 10 years, which would mean building a new prison at a cost of over $600 million. And that's just the capital infrastructure cost. That doesn't include operational cost. So it was a big ticket item for a budget that's already ballooned to about $1.5 billion. Adding another $600 million in construction and then operation costs was going to cost the state quite a bit of money. So the commission came together with a bunch of recommendations that ultimately became the basis for House Bill 3194. They created modest sentencing reforms to drug and property crimes. They instituted short-term transitional leave, which is a program that allows individuals to release from custody 90 days prior to their actual projected release date, where they come to their county of release and are technically still in DOC custody, but it allows for an early transition back into the community. And that saved the state a significant amount of money. In addition, they created a 10% carve-out in this grant program that provides incentives to the county for sending fewer people to prison and fewer people back to prison. So they really were focusing on recidivism and diversion on the front end. They created a 10% carve-out in that program for victim services. Additionally, there's a 3% holdback that the counties can apply for evaluations, really looking at randomized control trials. And Lane County has been one of, I think, 3 counties that have actually applied for these fundings, this funding, because we have research going on regularly in our criminal justice system. Finally, in 2017, the legislature amended 3194 through House Bill 3078, which created additional sentencing reforms to address the growing women's prison population and increase the short-term transitional leave program from 90 days to 120 days. So now I want to take a look at kind of where we were with 3194 prior to inception of the legislation. So if you go back to the beginning of 2013, this green line was where we were projected to go. The red line was Junction City. That was the point that we would need to build the new prison in Junction City. So with the passage of 3194, we've stayed well below that line. And this is the October forecast that shows that we're continuing to trend downward and stay well below the need to build another prison in the state. Now, the women's population is a little different, and they have climbed precipitously close to and actually over the line, which would have caused them to build a new prison at the OSP minimum site. It's an old prison that they would refurbish for women. And they have actually gone over the line last year and early this year. But they used emergency beds and they passed House Bill 3078, which has been really the driver in bringing these numbers down for the female population. So this legislation has had a profound impact on the state's prison population. But a lot of it is due to the efforts at the local level. Our programs here in Lane County that are diverting people, the 416 program that's run by the district attorney's office.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
But we're being told you ought to speak into the microphone so that this can be recorded.
Apologies. I'm in the mic.
And just pull it right up to your face like that. Yep.
Got it.
We say, eat the microphone.
I will eat the mic.
Just say it all again, Paul.
Huh?
Say it all again.
Okay. So, where was I?
Thanks, Joe.
The reason women,
Yeah, so,
prisoners,
no, actually, I remember where I was. So Lane County has really been instrumental in the growth in the programs that we have locally that are reducing our prison population and reducing recidivism. This next slide takes a look at the historical investment in the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program. And you can see our percentage, and again, this is the same percentage profile that we use for the Grant and Aid Program, has dipped to an all-time low in 15-17 and has climbed steadily. But the actual overall amount that we've received has been based on state funding. So the first year of the grant program, the state allocated $15 million. The second year, they allocated, I believe it was $33 million. Last biennium, it was about $37 million. In this biennium, it's just under $40 million. So our percentage is important, but the amount the legislature allocates is important. And this is done based on predicted cost savings. So they have a formula that governs how they come up with these numbers. Unfortunately, the legislature has never fully funded the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program, and Lane County has lobbied vociferously to make sure that we see adequate levels of funding in this program, because we believe we are doing the good work to keep us from building a new prison, and that we should be paid for the work that we're doing at an adequate level. So, Susan, you want to talk about these? Our rolling
Sure.
one-year sums of prison
My
usage?
live? Yes, I am. Eat the mic. This is from the Criminal Justice Commission's dashboard that they have online, and these are Lane County numbers. The first slide is, they're the one-year rolling sum of prison usage. So it basically, the first chart on the left is a rate. Let's see, is this the rate? No, the one on the left is the actual prison months. So they do a rolling number of prison months. And you can see that Lane County, we were, in 2013, we were one of the largest utilizers of prison beds in Oregon, was Lane County. It was ridiculous. We were like way up there. Even whether you compared our rate or our raw number, we were still way up there. And you can see that starting in 2014, that's when we actually spiked, and it got even worse. The line that's right along the 8,000 line is the baseline that we were given. And you can see also from looking that as far as the actual number of months, we've gone from 4,950 in 2013 actually, to 8,000. The baseline was 8,000. We have dropped from the baseline 3,000, basically, which is huge. It was a huge reduction for us. Likewise, the other one is actually the rate per 100,000 people. So it's a rate which gives us a little, different look at that, but you can see still that the graph is very similar on both. underneath there, the green line is the state. The state's it's gone down some, but it just has not had the radical transformation that Lane County has had in our prison utilization. So this is for the total population of men and women. Do you have the next slide?
Yeah, one other comment is that we are still above the state average. So we are still utilizing more prison beds per capita than our counterparts in other counties. Having said that, we have dropped significantly and are still continuing to trend downward. This is the women's.
Okay, the female slide, yes. And, there are many fewer women in prison, obviously. It's, what, about 10%?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 10%. But you can see again that our raw number, which is the one on the left, it peaked there at 512 and then began to work its way down. Our baseline was 1345 for July 12 to June 2015. We've dropped 834 basically from the baseline. And on the right is again the rate. And with the rate, actually, we came down below the state line with the female population. So that was a real improvement for us for being just like way, way the heck up there. So you got a Commissioner.
Commissioner Buck?
What happened in 2018 for it to spike a bit again, even though it was still under the baseline?
Yeah, that's hard to say without actually looking at the numbers. My guess is it could have been a spate of property crimes because we're looking at months of incarceration. You could have a few people that had sentences that were stacked that had longer prison sentences that may have driven it up. It'd be a better question for DA Perlow. But my guess is it had something to do with a spate of individuals that were incarcerated during that period.
And we're also dealing with relatively small numbers when you look at dealing with the women's numbers versus the men's.
That's right.
So it takes very few additional months to make that spike like that. But I think for me, what I do is just look at the overall trend, and it's gone down. But I think the stacking of cases was happening under the prior DA, where basically they would arrest people for a property crime and wait until they'd accrued 2 or 3 and then send people away for years. And it's had a long-term impact, and that's one of the policies that's changed with district attorneys. So it's been, I think that's part of the amazing progress that we're seeing, both in our percent of people on supervision, because people end up still with some accountability, and they end up on supervision, but a lot of them end up not going to prison. So.
Yeah, much better outcomes. Next up is the short-term transitional leave program. And this is that program that I said that allowed people to release 90 days early. Through House Bill 3078, it was bumped up to 120 days. And what you see here on the left are the raw numbers of individuals released on short-term transitional leave. As you can see, we've saved over 56,000 prison bed days through the release of these 863 people. The other number that's profound is the number of people that are unsuccessful with a new crime. The statewide average is 3%, Multnomah County is 4%, and our counterparts in Marion County are at about 3%. We are 50% lower than any of them, and more than that for Multnomah. So we've made significant progress with this population. The vast majority of these individuals are either released to sponsors or go through the RLAN program at the residential reentry center of the jail, and then transfer to sponsors. So we've been able to do some really good work with these folks. And this is another indicator of Lane County's success in keeping the prison population numbers down.
It's probably a lower number than Lane Community College or Peace Health.
Right.
Or some other institution in our community.
Indeed, indeed. So finally, I want to talk to you about the actual programs, and I'll have you reference your grant and aid board order. And if you go to the final pages, you will find the budget.
Well, we've passed out a new budget.
Okay, yeah.
I gave you 2 documents a while ago, 3 documents, actually. One of them was a new Justice Reinvestment Grant Program budget. The reason for that is twofold. One is that the software that the state's using counts pennies. It tells you only enter whole numbers, but then it breaks everything down into pennies. So pennies have moved around on the budget. So I printed a new one for the entire budget that shows all 3 funding streams, but also for the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program. Likewise, you have a new board order for that one, and I put the order number on it, and Diana Jones was going to load that into the system for you, because I believe a lot of you look at that online. But the rationale for that is one of the programs that we've applied for are those randomized control funds, or randomized control studies, RCT, trials. And that program is competitive, and we've divided it between 2 different studies that are going on currently. One of those will be a contract with American University for one of the studies. The other one, New York University is actually doing the study, but sponsors will employ the research assistants. So I had to move money around. I had it originally under NYU, and we moved that money instead to sponsors. So the list of contracts is the only thing that's changed in that board order for the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program.
So with that, if we take a look at, we're really focusing on the gray, violet, and goldenrod columns. You should be impressed that I know the difference between yellow and goldenrod, which represent the Grant and Aid Program, the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program, and the supplemental JRGP program. So the categories that we are funding are community-based custodial alternatives, which are provided by the Sheriff's Office and Parole and Probation. Community service and work crew, also provided by the Sheriff's Office. Custodial and sanction beds, I believe we have about 65 jail beds that are dedicated for this population in the Sheriff's Office. Sex offender services provided by the Center for Family Development and sponsors. Substance abuse and mental health provided by Emergence, Willamette Family Treatment Program, and Lane County Sheriff's Office. Supervision, which is one of the bigger line items on the budget for parole and probation. Transition services, which is sponsors, reentry housing. The DOC RLAND program, which is the program that I referenced recently at the Work Release Center that takes people out of prison 60 days prior to their release date or their short-term trans leave date. So we're actually saving the state even more money by bringing those folks into the community early. The Justice Reinvestment Oregon program, or the 416 program, which is our downward departure program that's run by the District Attorney's Office and Parole and Probation. The PSCC staffing, which is provided by LCOG, and a range of other programs, including Sheriff's Office, the courts, Center for Dispute Resolution, and Bridges to Safety. And finally, Victim Services, which is split up between Kids First, Women's Space, and SAS. Those 3 programs each get 30% of the allocation, and the final 10% goes to SIOSLA Outreach Services.
There's one error on this budget.
Okay.
The evaluation, the 3% of the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program funds, in the recipient column, it's for Veterans Treatment Court Strength at Home. It says LCSO, and I learned yesterday afternoon it's actually going to be a contract with American University. That's correct in your order. It's incorrect on the budget. It's line 58.
And then the last thing is that the RCT, which is the 3% holdback. Moving on to Measure 57. In 2008, the legislature passed Ballot Measure 57, enhancing sentences for drug and property crimes. At the same time, they required additional treatment to individuals who are at higher risk of reoffending. DOC has since provided supplemental funding to the counties on a formula basis to fund Measure 57 programs. This funding will supplement the Criminal Justice Commission grants to all 3 Lane County treatment courts. The Measure 57 budget includes a half-time PO for the adult treatment court, Addition of a half-time PO dedicated to the Veterans Treatment Court, 4 sanctioned beds in the jail, 1 bed at the Residential Reentry Center, and treatment slots through emergence for uninsured clients. And I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the work of Treatment Court Coordinator Danielle Hansen and the Sheriff's Office Finance Manager Debbie Haller, who are responsible for administration of the Measure 57 funding. I'd also like to acknowledge Commissioner Bozovich, who is not here today, who would have been presenting with us, who was really instrumental in guiding us through some of the very difficult decisions we had to make on the Budget Committee. I can't say enough about the role he played in his leadership in our work. All 3 recommendations were adopted by unanimous vote of the Budget Committee and the Public Safety Coordinating Council. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Okay, and just to be clear then, all of the 3 orders, 16, 17, and 18 are all part of this presentation, and you're done with all of it?
Yep.
Okay. And if we moved items 8B, 8C, and 8D, move that all to the consent calendar, we could approve all that right now?
Correct.
Okay. Before we do move that to the consent calendar, I'd like to call on any commissioners that want to make any comments or ask any questions.
Go ahead. I just want to thank you. This is a lot of work. Like, I can't imagine how many hours have been put into trying to figure out how to make this work.
3.5.
Sure, more than that. And the up and down through the cycle of the session and disappointment, that's got to be extremely tough when you know that you're doing really good work in our community, and what part of your good work do you have to cut? It's just an impossible decision. I mean, you eventually came to a decision amongst all your groups, and that's really commendable. I certainly support all that you've been doing, and if I will continue also to advocate, for, funding for these programs as well. It's really important to the entire community, and I just commend you for all that time and energy you put into this.
Okay, Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. A couple of things. Back in 1995, when the PSCC was originated, I was on the Eugene City Council. And to me, it seemed like a pretty broad charge. And it's amazing to see how much significant input the PSCC is in providing guidance to both our legislative efforts and what we do with those legislative efforts here in the county. And, it's a great deal of work. I watch you guys from a distance. I sometimes sit in the back row watching, and it's pretty significant. I do have a question, and that is, at the start of your presentation, you talked about a greater return to Lane County this year than we have seen over the last several legislative cycles, based upon the work of current District Attorney Patty Perlow. Can you describe that just a little bit? You showed a
Chair
graph.
Sorensen, Commissioner Farr, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. I know that, what do you think?
It's to do with the downward departure programs and those, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been able to do through the development of the Senate Bill 416 program, which was originally grant funded, which we have now picked up in the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program and through a county ad to keep that program whole, is that we are diverting significant numbers of people that would be prison bound, that have committed drug and property crimes. One of the things that's happening right now that is going to actually double the number of people that will be able to serve in those programs is we are just completing a randomized control trial of that program. So up until literally this month, every single person that has gone in there has been randomized either into a treatment group or services as usual. So only half of the people are getting the intervention. Now that the RCT is over, that population we're going to be able to serve twice as many people. Everybody will get the intervention. So that's really exciting. But prior to that, it has really been the fact that DA Perlow has embraced this program and worked closely with parole and probation and all of the other providers that provide a range of supports and services, including housing, treatment, mental health services, have really expanded the effort to get more people screened into the program so they're eligible and into the intervention if they're lucky enough.
Also, her efforts with taking a leadership role in forming a mental health court for Lane County has, again, kept a population that didn't belong in prison in the community, getting treatment, working with supervision, because they still have committed a crime, so they are on supervision, but they're not going to prison, and instead they're getting help, and the court's working very actively with them. And that program is slowly growing, but it's just one of those areas that support for that whole treatment court system has been critical.
Excellent. And I think the monthly mental health summit, which has a pretty significant impact, because you see people from very different disciplines working on the same issue.
Yeah, 40 people at 7:30 in the morning. It's pretty phenomenal.
With no coffee being served.
Right, no coffee, no donuts, I know.
Very good. And the net result, I'm looking at the graph that you showed twice, that shows the 9.57% of the state allocation, up from a low back in 6 years ago of 9.37. So.
Yeah, and when you consider 1 percentage point of $300 million is a lot of money, you know. So for each percentage point that we go up or down, we're talking a few $1 million. And fortunately, you know, we have been on the rise. It's kind of counterintuitive in that the more people we put on probation, the more money we get paid. You know, in a perfect world, we would incentivize getting people off of supervision and providing more money instead of taking money away when you have fewer people on supervision. But that's the way the formula works. And the fact that we weren't prosecuting a lot of lower level offenses during the administration of the prior district attorney left the door open as staffing levels rose in the DA's office to begin not only prosecuting those cases, but instituting new policies like downward departures, where we're not actually sending people to prison, but they're on probation, so we get credit for them.
Right. And that last sentence is really the one that I was fishing for, so well stated. And a great respect for the previous DA, but the current DA has taken it to a different level in terms of how we respond. So thank you very much.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Mr. Solomon, we've not really had the opportunity to get to know one another, but I want you to know that your reputation precedes you. I've heard nothing but sterling comments about you, and this presentation embodies that. And Ms. Sowers, I've known you for 30 years, and your dedication is phenomenal. I will vote to approve this in consent, but what I wanted to do is just ask one question. Understanding that oftentimes we're incented to do the wrong thing, but nonetheless you're organizing programs to receive support as best you can to do the right thing. I'm just going to focus on one thing to understand, because it's very global. One of your items up there on one of your slides said that you were, if I state this correctly, you were keeping open 2.5 positions in parole and probation at a cost of $506,000. That means each position is over $200,000.
That's
explain it to me.
Biannual number. So
thank you. That explains it.
So it's actually half.
That's 2 years. For those
salary
positions.
plus fringe benefits, it's a fully loaded package.
Completely answers the question.
Yeah.
My compliments to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would be applying for a parole officer at that rate.
If money were the only thing that incented you.
Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to move all of the items Order 19-08, 20-16, Order 19-08-20-17, Order 19-08-20-18 as amended. And I'll move all that to the consent calendar. And then, are there any items board members want to take off the consent calendar? Okay. Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar with the addition of the 3 board items dealing with the PSCC matters.
So moved as presented?
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Burney to approve the consent calendar with the addition of the 3 board orders that I mentioned we added. And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 4-0. Commissioner Bozovich excused. Thank you so much. Appreciate your help.
Commissioners, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We do have as one of those packets a letter of support that's required from the Board of County Commissioners. So there's a letter in there to be signed by you, and I don't know how that gets on your letterhead, but I'll leave
Okay.
that.
Can you work with Ms. Jones to make sure that
I will definitely do that, yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and next up is item 7A, Order 19-08-20-15, in the matter of approving certain contracts and amendments and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved contracts and amendments. Lisa Nichols, Quality and Compliance Manager, Lane County Department of Health and Human Services is here. And welcome, Ms. Nichols.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Chair Sorensen, Commissioners. I have a relatively straightforward item for you this morning. We have a series of 12 contracts and contract amendments that we are seeking authority delegation to the county administrator on. These contracts and amendments, each of them provides for continued service provision for services that we're already providing to our community. To lift up a couple of them, we've got a little over 1.3 million revenue contract from the Oregon Health Authority that supports our nurse-family partnership. So those are the services where we have nurses doing case management activities in the homes for our new moms and babies. We have some additional funding from Oregon Health Authority to continue to support our alcohol and drug education and prevention efforts. And we have a number of amendments around behavioral health services, aid and assist services, and other behavioral health related services that we provide in the community. So I'm open to any questions that you guys might have on these.
Okay, Commissioner Buck.
I had a quick question on the Oregon Housing and Community Services budget. That one was a pretty big jump. And I was just wondering what made up that big increase?
I'm sorry, which specific?
This is Oregon Housing and Community Services titled Master Grant Agreement, OHCS Master Grant Agreement for Human Services Funding. And the amended amount is $4,721,000.
I can certainly bring information back to you on that.
That would be great. I was just curious what comprises of that, and it looks like it's an increased revenue source, which is a good thing. I was just curious what where the money came from and what it would be used for.
Okay, I can get the specifics to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the order as presented.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Burney to approve Order 19-08-20-15. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries 4-0. The order is adopted. Commissioner Bozovich is excused. Thank you so much. And next up, we have item 8E in the matter of an update on the 2019 Veneta Urban Renewal Plan Amendment. With us to discuss this is Austin Ramirez, Interim Community and Economic Development Manager, Rick Ingram, Veneta City Manager, and also joining us at the table is?
Elaine Howard of Elaine Howard.
Elaine Howard. Welcome, Ms. Howard. What is your position?
She's acting as a consultant to the City of Veneta for the urban renewal update.
Very good. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Ramirez to give us a little intro and walk us through this.
I'll let Elaine and Rick talk about the amendment in greater detail, but in addition to briefing the board, they also have probably the best explanation of urban renewal I've seen, which I appreciated, and I think you will also. And they have lined up significant projects for the community that this amendment would support. So with that, I'll let them take it.
Austin, thank you. Excuse me. Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, thank you for taking the time this morning to allow us to give you a brief on the amendment that we're proposing for our urban renewal plan. I have introduced already Elaine Howard. Elaine Howard Consulting is pretty much the consultant when it comes to urban renewal plan updates, assisting most cities throughout the state. So I'd like to provide a little bit of background before we actually get into the full slideshow. We have just a single urban renewal district, and if you're not familiar with them, hopefully you'll have a better understanding once we're completed with the presentation. There are several cities throughout the Lane County area that have multiple urban renewal districts, but we've had one. It's been in place since 1984. That was put in place 22 years after we were incorporated in 1962. So it's actually been around for quite a while. Really with the intent that we really wanted to create Veneta as a mid-lane service center, and at the same time trying to create a little bit more of a robust economy out there, and hopefully drive us toward some level of prosperity after all the mills had left and we were in a major transition at that time. I want to give you a little bit of background on why the 1984 was maybe significant for passing that ordinance, putting in place the urban renewal district. Between 1980 and 1990, Veneta's population grew by only 29 people. So over a 10-year period of time, we had 29 people added to our population. Now, some of that had to do with Oregon in itself was in a pretty significant recession. But at the same time, Veneta was one of those cities where we were caught without an available drinking water supply, nor was our sewer capacity at that level where we could actually bring on any growth. During the 80s, early 90s, and actually preceding the 80s, Veneta found itself in 3 different building moratoriums, either meaning that we were not allowed to issue building permits due to the lack of supply of our drinking water and or for the limited capacity that we had in our sewer plant. So basically, we had no ability in which to grow as a city, to grow our own tax base, hopefully to add to Lane County's tax base. 2 of the key projects identified in the 1984 Urban Renewal Plan were water expansion projects and addition of sewer capacity. In fact, during those first 20 years from 1984 to 2004, over 80% of our urban renewal expenditures went towards those 2 projects. So basically to get us back up where we could actually accommodate growth. In 1998, because of enacted legislation, the city set its current maximum indebtedness for the district at $13,613,000. Of that original maximum indebtedness, the Urban Renewal Agency has spent or obligated a little over $10 million. So we've been pretty prudent with our dollars. But we have a very long list of projects that we still want to complete. Some of those projects are from the original 1984 plan, some from the 2007 amendment that clarified downtown improvement projects. Others were from the 2000 amendment that when we added the eWeb pipeline as an urban renewal project and brought it into town. During those amendments, several large projects were actually removed from the urban renewal plan. I've been in discussion with the 3 other main taxing districts in the Veneta area, the Fern Ridge Library, the Lane Fire Authority, our local fire department, and the Fern Ridge School District. These conversations have taken place over the last 3 months. They all view that our past investments have helped their own tax base grow. They think that we have been good stewards of those urban renewal dollars, and they support this amendment that would add about 20% to our maximum indebtedness. And so unless there's any other questions, I'm going to let Elaine kind of walk us through the technical aspects of the amendment.
And I was told that a couple of you are relatively new to the county commission, and urban renewal may be a new concept to you, so feel free to interrupt me and ask anything. I give these presentations all the time and know urban renewal from A to Z, so would feel very comfortable being interrupted or adding anything. So this amendment is what's called a substantial amendment. ORS 457 governs urban renewal, and it stipulates certain things have to be done in a more formal process. So a substantial amendment has to go through full review by the Urban Renewal Agency, the city's planning commission, a briefing to the county, which is this, and then a hearing in front of the city council advertised to or noticed to all citizens of Veneta. So it's a fairly large process to do that. This amendment increases their maximum indebtedness. Maximum indebtedness in urban renewal is the controlling factor of an urban renewal plan. It is what determines when an urban renewal area ends. So if an area reaches its maximum indebtedness, it may no longer take money from the county assessor's office. So this would increase the authority. It adds projects, adds property to the urban renewal area, and does a general updating, and we'll go through all of that. This shows a map of the present urban renewal area. The purple is the existing urban renewal area, and the expansion are single properties or lots that are being taken into the urban renewal area. And I'll let Rick kind of explain those strategic additions.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. So the most significant one down there is, it's hopefully most of you have spent a little time out in Veneta. The Highway 126, of course, runs east-west on the top, and then Territorial Highway that you discussed earlier at your agenda runs north and south. Bolton Hill comes in, and that large parcel labeled D and E is a sports complex that the Territorial Sports Program has been using for over 35 years. It's actually one of the longest running sports fields in Lane County. We purchased it from the Oregon Department of Forestry about 12 years ago, and it's basically remained in that somewhat uncompleted condition. It was originally the Oregon Department of Forestry's airfield when the Department of Forestry actually had planes that flew in and out of their districts. We have a growing young population, more and more demands on that facility, and the city and our partners feel that by enhancing that sports complex, we can begin to attract tournaments, we can attract more visitors into our community, and hopefully with more visitors, maybe someday we'd get a motel, maybe we'd add to our different levels of restaurants and whatnot. So that's the most significant chunk. It's a currently owned city piece of property, but we're not allowed to put any investment of urban renewal dollars into it because it's not actually within the district. The other parcel, the Smart G there, is actually the Fern Ridge Library. So they were outside of the urban renewal district. And we really would like to be in a position to help them expand their facility. And or if they were ever faced with an emergency, we would want to be able to supply dollars to get that, as we think all community facilities, the sooner we get them up and operational, the more likely we can bring back some vibrancy to the community. The only two private parcels are A and B, and those are on the east side of Territorial Highway, pretty much across from the downtown renovation efforts that we're doing. Those are, one property is an older gas station, and we want to just be able to bring our redevelopment toolkit to help that property owner redevelop it, get a business in there, and actually start adding to our business base and actually to our, hopefully to our overall tax base that would benefit all the districts.
And then there's a bit of right-of-way. The Oregon statutes have been interpreted to say that an urban renewal area has to be contiguous. So to be contiguous, we have to, if we add a parcel, we have to then take that right-of-way to tie it to the existing urban renewal area. So this is what the urban renewal area will look like if the amendment is adopted. It is all within the city limits. The proposed maximum indebtedness increase would be an additional $4.8 million. The statute allows the city council to increase their maximum indebtedness on their own, with their own approval, if it is within 20% of the original maximum indebtedness as indexed by inflation. So we did that calculation. That calculation gives them the authority for about a $4.8 million increase on their own, giving them a new total maximum indebtedness of about $18.4 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The city council doubles as the urban renewal agency in Bonita as it does in Eugene, is that correct?
That is correct,
Yes.
Commissioner.
So the statute requires concurrence from other taxing districts if the increases are above that 20% as indexed. Bonita made the decision to make their increase just below that so that they could do that on their own. Any questions about what maximum indebtedness is or how that?
Regarding the concurrence, I think you just answered my question, but just to be clear, that's the concurrence of the county, the community college, the library district, the fire district, and other taxing districts.
If you require concurrence for maximum indebtedness increase, you have to have 75% of the taxing districts who levy the permanent rate levy. So
Okay.
you have to just look at what that total permanent rate levy is and add up a 75% amount.
If there were 4 taxing districts, it would be 3 of the 4.
Yeah, it's usually a city, county, and school district. That's typically what concurrence is.
Okay.
And again, this one doesn't require
And
concurrence.
it sounds like our role is, in this process, is to hear the report and the update. And so this presentation has discharged the county's role in it.
That's correct.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, if I may?
Yes,
You invited dumb questions.
I did.
I see one of the bullet points says the estimated impact of the proposed amendment to Lane County is $409,000. Does that mean the county, forgive the question, but does that mean the county loses that revenue?
If you don't mind, I have,
Okay.
I will get to that.
get there, that's
And we will
fine.
go through it specifically.
Your
So-
pace.
So the project categories that are being added are transportation projects, parks projects, miscellaneous fiber, a retail pop-up district, acquisition, ability to acquire properties for redevelopment purposes, and administration. I believe you were given a handout in your packet that went through each specific project. I know Rick is prepared to go through that in more detail if you would like, and if not, we can move on to the next slide. So let me know, move on, he says. Okay.
No, I'd be interested.
If they have questions, they'll ask them.
Commissioner Bernie, do you have a specific question
Yes,
about
sir, I
one of
do.
them? Or?
Yeah, thank you, because I serve on the Urban Renewal Agency for Springfield with the City Council. So my question is, what do you estimate the increased tax revenue for the city of Veneta by making these investments will be? And how do you get there?
So when we did the projections for this urban renewal area, we just based the increased value on the existing annual, what it has been. So we aren't making projections for huge amounts of increased value in the community due to this, but for just continued that 3% growth within the urban renewal area in the city.
Sure, and I'll just, one take on this is that as we have done up until now is the majority of our funds have gone towards public infrastructure. And so, of course, we have seen a big growth in subdivisions in Veneta during the 2000s. We're going to continue to make those investments in public infrastructure. I didn't bring the map with me, but actually in 1984, we had 3 of our main streets in downtown Veneta that were still gravel. And so as you can see from the old plan and even up to the new plan, we're still trying to bring many of our streets up to a basic city standard. And of course, those investments will hopefully spur on additional improvements in the downtown area, which we hope will bring additional tax base into the community. So I'd have to kind of defer to Elaine other than the response that she gave you about what our projections are. But,
Right. We just did the basic 3%. added.
I hope you don't mind the question.
Yeah, no, not at
No,
all.
Springfield has done an awesome job in theirs of attracting new industry, and I think Veneta would love to be able to do that by improving the overall conditions in their city and get the kinds of investments that Springfield's gotten, which have been amazing.
Hopefully ain't seen nothing yet, but anyway.
So a lot of times people ask, where does the money come from for urban renewal? And that's a really good question. When an urban renewal area is established, the county assessor establishes what's called a frozen base assessed value. The taxes off of that frozen base assessed value, the assessed value of properties within the urban renewal area at the time it's established, continues going to all of the taxing jurisdictions. As the values increase, the taxes off that increased value go to the urban renewal agency for programs, projects, administration, only within the urban renewal area. They may not spend their dollars outside of the urban renewal area. So all of those other taxing jurisdictions forego that money over the life of the urban renewal area. It's only for properties in the urban renewal area. So if the rest of the city grows, like the subdivisions that have come in Veneta, all of the taxing districts enjoy that growth within the city for properties that are outside of the urban renewal area. This just shows this in one concept, and that is when you see the green bar that goes to the right, for regular property tax revenues, those go to regular taxing jurisdictions. At the point that an urban renewal area is established, anything above that growth, which is the blue, goes to the urban renewal agency, and again, is just for that area that's within the urban renewal area. This is another graphic that shows urban renewal over time. And then again, that green at the bottom is the frozen base. The blue is the increment that goes to the urban renewal agency. And you can see that that builds slowly. And that's sometimes why urban renewal areas take so long to reach their maximum indebtedness, because they are gaining that growth typically, unless you have large new projects, just off of that 3% increment that our property tax limitation allows property taxes to grow in an area. Are there questions about how urban renewal works in that frozen base? No. So the present Veneta urban renewal area, this is a projection of the impacts on the different taxing jurisdictions, and I just put the county in here. I didn't do the schools part. For the present area, and this just shows if they didn't do the amendment and they just reached their current maximum indebtedness, what the impacts to you would be. So this starts in fiscal year end 2019, because that's when we started working with the county on their urban renewal plan update. So right now, those impacts for the existing area over the time frame to fiscal year end 2025 would be $426,000. So annually, those are in the 60,000, 70,000 range as they go forward. This just shows the impacts of the amendment. The reason we start these in fiscal year in 2025 is because the existing maximum indebtedness takes us to that date. The new maximum indebtedness would begin showing as an impact to you in fiscal year in 2025. So the projections are that they would reach that maximum indebtedness by fiscal year end 2030, and that would be an additional about $400,000 impact to the county in taxes foregone that go to the urban renewal area to do projects within the area. And so you sum those and you get an overall impact to the county of about $836,000. We do that for every taxing district, and just a reminder that the schools and education service districts are not directly impacted by urban renewal because they're funded through the state school fund on a per pupil basis. So it's an indirect impact. That impact is to the state school fund, which has many other sources that also go into that state school fund. There are no bonds or local option levies impacted by this urban renewal area, and that's important for if you do some kind of a GO bond for housing, as you talked about, this urban renewal area would not take any of those funds I've worked hard with the legislature to make sure to change the legislature, the ORS 457, so that there are not impacts from urban renewal on bonds and local option levies. There was a question when we took this information to the library board about those few new properties. So the majority of those properties are already city-owned, but for those that are not, when that frozen base goes on to the property tax roll. So this plan, if adopted by the Veneta City Council, goes into effect October 10th. That will probably be after the county has certified their new tax base for the next fiscal year. So the tax assessor would put those properties on after they receive notification from the city, and the values, would be the new values that are established in the October tax roll. That is our anticipation. So those values then are values of those properties as of January of this year, 2019. And then the frozen base, so it's a very small increase to the frozen base assessed value because only a couple of those are private properties. So the timeline, the Veneta Urban Renewal Agency heard this item on June 10th. They passed a motion to send the amendment and report out for formal public review. On August 14th, the city briefed the Fern Ridge Library District on the amendment. Our briefing today, on September 3rd, there'll be an open house in Veneta to tell anyone in the public who's interested in knowing about the projects and what the financial implications are. And on September 3rd, the Planning Commission will review it for conformance to the comprehensive plan. And then September 9th, the City Council will have a public hearing and potentially vote on the amendment. It is a non-emergency ordinance, so it doesn't go into effect until 30 days after vote. Any questions?
I see you've done a lot of work for Portland and a lot of small cities. What's the smallest city you've worked with?
It's a good question.
Myrtle Creek, I thought. Myrtle Creek was one of them.
I did Myrtle Creek, I did Roseburg, I did Cresswell, I've done Jacksonville, Talent, Phoenix. I've worked with Brookings, Klamath Falls, Grants Pass. I mean,
I've been everywhere.
I've been everywhere.
I've been everywhere. Yeah, I know that song.
I've worked on over 100 urban renewal plans, reports, and amendments. So.
Yep. Okay. So is there anything coming down the pike in terms of the legislature on urban renewal, in terms of this problem of, you mentioned one of the slides was there's an indirect effect on schools. And so some of us have had the perspective, well, we do need to get on top of the total amount of money that is denied the schools through the process of urban renewal and other tax measures. Do you know what the number currently is? Is it a large number? Is it growing? Is it smaller?
I don't have that number off of the top of my head. What I do know is in this last legislative session, we spent about a year and a half preceding the session with urban renewal agencies negotiating with the special districts associations, the fire districts, and the school district on some changes to urban renewal statute. And there was, House Bill 2174 was adopted by the legislature that made some changes to the urban renewal statute. The issue of those impacts to the school districts was talked about a little bit, but wasn't raised to the point of anybody saying urban renewal needed to be changed to eliminate that. I think the legislature understands urban renewal is one of the very few economic development tools that our communities have. And although it does impact the state school fund, there are other sources that go into the state school fund, general fund monies, lottery monies, some federal funds. So I think it is a decision by the legislature that urban renewal is an effective tool across the state.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Excellent answer, Commissioner Bernie?
I was just waiting to see if you remembered my name.
He's Joe.
I'm supportive, not that you need that. And I just really appreciate meeting you both. And I've loved Veneta for 30 years. And I completely understand the history that you gave us. So, no, I didn't have another question. I just really appreciated the background information. And, we don't have enough economic development tools, period, much less in smaller communities, is my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for those comments.
Okay, Commissioner Buck.
I'm very supportive. Just seeing the map of Veneta makes me horribly sentimental because I grew up there in Acorn Court, and at the time, it was a kind of a newer development. Looks a little different now. But I remember walking or biking to Bolton Hill and playing softball there on the field where I broke my nose. And they had this huge rock pile, and that was just as fun as anything else for the kids to play on. And I can kind of visualize what that area would look like with some redevelopment, and I think it would just be fantastic for the community as a whole. And appreciate your work in trying to bring, some more vibrancy to the community after so many decades of change as we've seen all over our rural communities. It's even more sentimental for me when I drive through Veneta, but just the map brings it all back, and I can remember every street, walking, biking, and I would look forward to being there when you do redevelop that park.
When we do the grand opening, we'll invite you out.
Yeah, I'd love to be there.
Okay, Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I spent more than a little bit of time in Veneta. You have some great restaurants out there, including Our Daily Bread, which is a real landmark. But significantly, I think about Veneta, what I think about the most is back when I was a Eugene City Councilor, back in 2010 to 12, I'm looking at a polling here that said, selling water to Veneta. And it was one of the most contentious things that we took part in as a Eugene City Council was whether we were going to allow EWEB to sell water to Veneta. And overwhelmingly, public supported that. And the fact that we, as the city council, had to debate it and you were there. You remember the discussion that we had. And I remember
Drove the process. Yeah.
And it was painful. I mean, it was like going to the dentist without Novocaine sometimes. But really, the ultimate decision was Veneta needed water, and we were able to allow EWEB to sell water to Veneta. Question then, has that been a pretty, this is a softball, has it been a pretty significant asset to you in development?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Commissioner Farr. It really was a game changer for Veneta. I mean, if you understand, most cities in Lane County receive their drinking water supply from surface water, so most pull from rivers. Veneta relied on some very limited groundwater sources because the Long Tom River just was not an available source for drinking water for us. So we basically would have found ourselves in another cycle of more moratoriums. And so by bringing in it's a 24-inch pipeline that we built from Green Hill, 10.2 miles, all the way into Veneta, 24 inches that will basically supply our water supply for at least 50 years. And then we'll think about putting booster pumps on it, so it'll actually supply water as far out as 100 years. So, we've made the bulk of our water improvements, water investments that the city will have to do. And we can now start focusing on truly economic development efforts and other things that will pay even bigger dividends for having a long-term supply of water now. So.
And in the meantime, you drink the same clear, fresh water that I'm drinking out of this glass right now.
That's correct, yes. Yeah, so thank you for your support back then.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we've heard the report, and that is our duty, so thank you so much. Appreciate all your great work.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Chair, and commissioners, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is item 9A, our county council, and before you give whatever announcements you have, I'd like to ask, what is our executive session plan today, just 4 o'clock?
Yes, 4 o'clock time certain with.
Okay, 4 o'clock, okay. So let's move on into county council announcements. Do you have any announcements?
I do have one from the agenda team this morning. I have heard back from 2/3 of the attorneys regarding that work session, and it looks like October 16th at 9 a.m. is the one that works for.
Okay, is that a Wednesday?
Yes,
Yeah, Wednesday, October 16th.
correct.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, now we'll bring up item 9B, which is the report of our fatal crash investigation team, FCIT. And with us to introduce this is Steve Dingle, Lane County Council. Could you introduce the folks at the table?
Certainly, Chair. Thank you. We have Elizabeth Maxwell from HHS, and we have Ms. Taylor, who you know, who's a regular here. She's she's going to be my technical person here. She does have it up. All right. Thanks for the opportunity to do our quarterly update. We have some pretty exciting news to report, which I'll get to in a minute. I know I gave us somewhat of a historical presentation last time because we had 2 new commissioners. But to remind you, the reason I'm on the team is because when we go through and evaluate these, we at times can create and discover issues that create potential liability for the county, so that my presence on the team protects that information. Ms. Maxwell is here because she reflects, which I'll discuss more in a moment, about a presentation we heard from Clackamas County, broadening the participation because there are so many things that go into eliminating these fatal crashes. And the main thing is that this board and we made a commitment towards 0 deaths, and we do that with the 3 E's, which is enforcement, education, and engineering. And you can see some of the things that we've done that are in your packet. So I'm going to focus on the future items. Becky, can we go to the, yeah, there you go. Don't even try and read it. But the point is, we went to a presentation by a planner in Clackamas County, and the reason it was significant is that our fatal crash investigation team, they're thinking about forming one. Our fatal crash investigation team favorably is like one of the best in the nation. He compared, it was Chicago, I always forget, it was like an area in Tennessee and California. And with the exception of a physician, we checked all the boxes, and that they, in fact, Clackamas County is going to would like to model their team after our team. And basically what this is intended to illustrate is, he talked about when you investigate fatal crashes, there's all kinds of intervention points. He gave the example of a crash that involved alcohol, and you might have thought if you looked at just the end cause, you might think that there was one thing, but he talked about how he went back, and actually what it did is it went all the way back to the person on the golf cart that served the person the alcohol hours earlier before the crash. So you've got to go all the way back. You can't just look at the engineering and what happened, the person departed the road. And then what he did is he pointed out all of the different places that there were interventions that could have prevented that crash. The person serving the alcohol, it turns out the valet who actually went and got the person's vehicle, noticed that he dropped his keys and had trouble. All of that was way ahead of coming up with an engineering response, which I won't get into. This is a really weird piece of road, and that initially that was what everyone thought might be the issue. This just shows all the different places that you can intervene, and the importance of having people with a broad range of skills. He gave another example of investigation of an area of Chicago, for example, where there are a large number of crashes, and if you had only focused on the engineering, you would have missed the point. And I think the point he made was that there were a lot of young people in that particular area, and what was really the source of all those crashes were all of the distracted drivers, not the engineering on the road. So again, it's exciting that we are actually being used as a national model, the way that we run our team, and that there are other people, that Clackamas County looking to establish it is going to look at our model. And the one piece that we lack, we hope we're going to get with, is an epidemiologist. We're hoping with a new hire at HHS that person's going to be able to devote their time to the team, and that will basically round out and check all the boxes for the optimal composition of a fatal crash investigation team. And we're targeting our reduction efforts towards the most risky behaviors, which is speed reduction and DUI. And I said we've missed that one piece with public health, which we've had with Elizabeth, but we're going to sort of beef that up, hopefully with the new epidemiologist.
All right, so thank you, Steve, and thank you, commissioners, for having us this morning. I just want to acknowledge, too, I've been sitting here for a while. You all have had a busy morning, kind of hopping from many topics, so thank you for staying with us. I almost feel like, should we do a seventh inning stretch? Are you all okay? So this quote is from somebody from my team, Emily Bear, who some of you may know. And she said, if we want long-term behavioral change, we need to get into successful communications in a way that people are going to hear the message in the first place and in a way that people will do the behavioral change. And so that's always something that we struggle with in public health is if we knew how to make people, do what we wanted them to do, it would all be solved, right? Nobody would need a job anymore, but we don't know exactly how to do that. So we put our best efforts forth. We try to focus on evidence-based change. And that's one of the values in public health, and it's definitely, what I've tried to contribute to the fatal crash investigation team. And so we want to explore more ways to promote evidence-based behavior change. And on the team, we have a wide representation across the county. So we have Mr. Dingle, myself from public health, Becky, a lot of people who work with some of the traffic engineering. And so they get kind of focused on environmental changes, which is perfect. We need that as one part of the stool when we're looking at something that has happened in our community that's usually kind of tragic. But we also have been looking at campaigns, and is there, something that we could do proactively and preventatively so that these things wouldn't happen. And I think for a lot of times, it's pretty easy to focus on the negative. We'll just tell people, hey, just don't do this thing that will result in a really bad tragedy. And we hope that they'll do that. And what the research shows us is that it's actually better to focus more positively. And so we all buckle up as opposed to a more negative message, drink and die, all of us who are doing the right thing, we get that, right? That has a lot of resonance with us. But for other folks, it may not. And so telling people to do something positive, like buckling up. And so we're still exploring those possibilities and exploring across the team what might be a good message. And so I'll turn it over to, or am I? Oh, sorry, I'm the next one too. So I'm not turning it over yet. Safe routes to school. So we've also focused on educating youth about roadway safety. And so we've talked about, people, most of the people I think probably at this table, we took driver's ed, right? That was a really normal thing to do. And, within the metro region, pretty available. What we've noticed is that in the rural regions, it's not as available. And so you may recall the ODOT grant that enabled Lane Education Service District to hire a driver education coordinator to increase driver education access to rural high school students. We're hopeful that that's a very preventative thing that can happen. And we're also excited to share that another grant has been awarded just last week to provide bicycle and pedestrian safety education to rural elementary and middle school students. And as we all know, every time somebody from public health comes in front of you, we're usually saying, let's get them as early as possible, right? And so this is one effort where we're going to hopefully impact students at a really young age. So the funding enables the creation of a new Safe Routes to School rural coordinator position dedicated to forming and implementing the first ever Safe Routes to School rural program for elementary and middle school children in rural Lane County. And currently, these programs have only been available, like I said, to the metro area, and this has left out 13 of our rural school districts. And this program will address this inequity, benefiting about 26 elementary and middle schools located in rural Lane County. So we're very excited and very pleased that this has happened. And it'll focus specifically on bicycle and pedestrian safety education at the schools themselves, so where kids are, where we can find them and where they're comfortable. And the photo up there is an example of an after-school activity at Springfield Elementary School this summer. And we're excited that the Lowell School District agreed to serve as our pilot for this new program. And now I will turn it back to Steve.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. As you may recall, roadway departures are a greatest safety risk because they're the leading type of fatal crash in rural Lane County. And Public Works has been doing a number of things, integrating rumble strips, safety edges, curve warning signs, guardrail upgrades. With all roadway and pavement preservation projects, it's a good way to do it. It's cost effective. And just by way of statistics, centerline rumble strips have been proven to reduce head-on fatal collisions by 45%. And we put some, a summary of those features that we're doing in your packet. The other thing we've done is, and you can see some of them up here, is we've also investigated a number of cases that involved people who are not in cars using the roadway, and we've done and worked towards some different specific projects that are, again, detailed in your packet to reduce the risk to those folks, and you can see some of those highlighted there. The next one, and of course, our weakest leg, if you will, of our 3 E's is enforcement. But we've seen some improvement in that area because we've gotten some help with the legislature, and you saw one of those. We did an excellent job during the country fair. You'll recall that the speed limit was reduced, temporarily reduced during the fair. We heard from the sheriff's office that they thought that that was a beneficial thing. And we saw, for the first time, some coordination with, there were some issues with some people that were on the shoulder, which presented a risk not only because people were looky-loo and running into people because they were looking at the people selling their wares on the shoulder, but also the shoulder, a lot of people don't understand, is reserved for emergencies. It's not supposed to be parking. It's supposed to be available for people to go off. So we coordinated with the county council's office, and we solved that problem without any issue. So with that, I'll turn it back to Elizabeth for the final slide.
Okay, so you may recall from other presentations I've made to you about health and prevention. It's really important for us to recognize traffic safety as a public health issue that also requires prevention and intervention. Our intervention to prevent fatal collisions is to save not only the life of the driver, but of passengers, other drivers, other people on the roadway walking and biking. It's not enough to say the driver was at fault, so there's nothing we can do. We are all daughters, sons, and perhaps parents and grandparents. We need everyone to participate in our effort to save lives. Thank you, and feel free to ask us any questions.
Okay, Commissioners, Commissioner Buck?
I believe there are some hindrances in photo enforcement, but given the sheer miles in our county, and even if we had the money to add additional sheriffs on patrol, this is just impractical to be able to look and be everywhere at once. What are the barriers to doing photo enforcement, and would it result in any additional behavior changes or reductions in fatal crash?
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Buck, there's a couple of limiting factors. One is being authorized to use photo enforcement, but the big limitation has been, to this point, has been with the manpower for the sheriff's office. Because again, I think there's certainly I think a lot of people think that it just automatically, the photo's taken and it gets sent. But actually, someone has to look at the photographs, someone has to write a report, someone has to put that all together and then send it off. And then, of course, if someone challenges it, someone has to go to court to enforce it. So we've certainly talked, the sheriff is certainly anxious to consider that and do it. He thinks that in targeted in specific areas, that it would have the effect of reducing some of the speeds. But right now, it's really just a legislative and a manpower limitation issue.
When you say legislative, you mean to have photo enforcement, we would need a legislative change?
They provide authorization for those different things, for those areas.
I mean, if we set up our own mobile photo enforcement, wouldn't we be authorized to do that under current?
No, I think it would require legislative authorization.
Oh, okay.
Sounds like something I would like to ask the legislative committee
Well,
to.
I know that the legislature's authorized at least Beaverton and Portland to have photo radar that is within their city limits. Okay, so I know they've authorized that, but my understanding is that there's much more technology now than was available at the time the legislature passed that, and that now people local governments are approving photo radar, and maybe it's advisory, you know, by the way, we saw you drive too fast, we saw you do this, that. Maybe it's advisory, I don't know.
No, I'm sorry. I was talking about the running the red lights thing, not radar. You're talking about something different. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
Okay, well, I think that what we should do is have you guys, the next time you come in, tell us what we are currently what we can authorize, because I believe the technology is evolving. I believe it's evolving quickly, and it may be within current legislative limits. Don't know. I think you are correct that we need to put on our legislative calendar and talk with our legislative committee about working with other communities such as Beaverton that already got authority so that we can be included in the legislative authority. I do think that's an important move too, but meanwhile, I think we could do more with existing technology. And the last time I looked at this resolution, I believe is the proper term, you can see the person's face. You can see if they're eating French fries and what brand of French fry they're eating, or even what brand of cigarette they're smoking. I mean, it's remarkable in terms of the quality of the imagery that shows the license plate and the driver specifically.
And I think even with that, I think what we're going to run into is that limiting factor of there still needs to be someone to go, as you know, Commissioner, you can't just send a thing and say you're guilty.
Yeah.
Someone has to process it. And that was one of the things that the sheriff was, again, I think a lot of people who weren't involved in it didn't have any idea about how much time that would take.
Yep.
But if you're getting hundreds of photographs and someone has to sit down, you know, run the license plate, you know, put together a report, prepare a ticket, send it off, and then have someone available to testify in the event it was.
Well, we would have now long-term data available from Beaverton in particular to find out how many people challenge those tickets, how many city workers it takes to review them, and some kind of ratio of the number of tickets issued and the number of people it takes to issue those tickets, and then the number of people challenging it, because people have a right to challenge them. And there have been instances where vehicles receive the ticket, not the driver. And that is a defense, is that if you're, just speaking off the top of my head from the experience that I'm sure Commissioner Buck will be enjoying when she gets there, and that is when teenagers take your car and they drive your car, they don't always observe all traffic laws. And so if they don't, the photograph doesn't know, the camera doesn't know who's driving. They assume that the registered owner is driving, which isn't true. And so you can see people saying, I'm opting out. That wasn't me. And as I understand the current Oregon laws, you say that and sign that, and it's done. And the only penalty is for a false swearing that you've made a false statement. Other than that, you can say, I'm sorry, it wasn't me. I looked.
And what I'll do too is I know that there's also when you talk about the legal aspects, I know that there's a Court of Appeals decision that looked at this whole issue in terms of the shifting the burden and all that. I'll bring that back the next time too.
So I'm just hoping that there are ways for us to have the leadership you guys are already showing to look into whether there are some lawful and reliable and helpful hints to tell people, because these death numbers, at least the historical death numbers, are really horrible. And here we are, the leader, and then if you looked at it on a per capita basis outside of a city, I'm sure we're at the top in the state. If you took out the cities of our county population, we'd be at the top. So it's unincorporated Lane County that's really at risk. And quite frankly, just driving around my own part of the county in Eugene, red lights are very commonly run. And I think that that's something else we could be, is leading other communities. And we know that a lot of these horrible deaths have been city. The one out in East Springfield, probably one of the main reasons that Springfield put some additional controls on that intersection was because of the deaths. So anyway, great job, Commissioner Farr.
I'll be very brief. During my years on MPC, we received a lot of information regarding Towards Zero deaths and how we can work in cooperation with other jurisdictions. And if we look at the dangerous highways in Lane County, 126 is the most dangerous highway. That's a state highway. And I know that one of the things that we do is cooperate with the state to make sure that the interface and intersections we're maximizing the safety elements there. And a lot is happening. If you look at what's happened on Highway 126 in the last 4 or 5 years, shortening passing lanes, the various things that have been done, eliminating trees. Currently, people complain about the delay going to Florence, but really ultimately it's going to make it a safer highway. But I really wanted to mention, Dr. Maxwell, the work that you've done, and Becky, the work that you've done. And I'll mention, I never fail to mention that Becky 3 years ago was named the Outstanding Public Employee for Lane County by LCOG. Congratulations again, Becky.
A mere 36 months ago.
That, the work that's been done to really get us to the point where, as you've stated, we are among the leaders in the nation in addressing the issues. And Clackamas County is patterning their program after ours. To me, that tells me that what we have done so far, all of the future possibilities that we have notwithstanding, what we've done so far has been significant. So thank you very much for that. It makes me feel better on the many trips I take to the various parts of the county, particularly now Territorial Highway, which is now a county highway, as of this year is now a county highway, and the things that we can do for the future. So I am highly impressed with the coordination, the cooperation, and the work that you've done in conjunction with other jurisdictions. So Dr. Maxwell, thank you for being here this morning.
And we can certainly bring, the next time we come in, we'll certainly bring someone from the Sheriff's Office. I should mention, obviously, there's a member of, it's the Chief Deputy Wilkerson, but he's back at the FBI Academy. So we do have a member from the Sheriff's Office as part of the team.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thanks for all your good work.
Thank you.
Okay. So maybe now that Mr. Rickoff's returned, we could go back to 8A, the county administration announcements.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, thank you, and I really do appreciate your indulgence. The chance to meet with all staff in parole and probation is a very good thing, and I had a chance to talk to them about how far we're moving along with the purchase of new office space for them. Just real quickly, County Administrator Mokrohysky is with family, visiting family, and he will return Friday and will be back with you next week. In terms of earlier comments in the days, as you heard from County Council, the joint work session on aerial spray and local governance looks like it's on your agenda for 10/16. If we have 2 out of the 3 partners, and we'll try to land the 3rd partner for that work session. Also, the issue of the housing bond that came up during public comment a considerable number of times. That is an open staff assignment, and it's being worked on, and it will return to the board. That Chair Sorensen had asked for that to come back and got the head nods on that. And it's a meeting, as I understand it, with Mr. Eisenberg, amongst others, to continue the progress on that work. I think that's all I have at this time.
Okay, and so we'll do our executive session at 4 o'clock. We'll defer other business until later in the meeting. And so at this time, we're getting ready to do the recess until 1:30. Any commissioners? Yep, go ahead.
Do we know what the format for that, just the two meetings you indicated, either what the format for that joint meeting will be or who will be involved in determining what that format will be? Because it sure seems to be, from a variety of quarters, a much anticipated meeting.
So one thing we could do is we could just discuss that under the topic of work session. Even though it says work session request, we could discuss that. Or we could do it now if we have time.
Well, no, that's fine. Then my two things for whenever we do it, not necessarily now,
Yep.
is that, and then the same thing with the housing bond. I think I've heard from every person I've heard talk about it, they have a different view of what it is. And I just need to know what the process will be to develop clarity, size, content, structure, process.
Okay, well, why don't we take those up under 13C, so we can have a bigger discussion of it. And I agree, we could talk about the joint work session on the ballot measures and the work session on the housing bond. And that way, everybody can have their perspective offered. Okay, and maybe by then in the meeting, we'll know a little bit more about the availability of the parties for that, at least one of those two.
Yes.
Okay. Good. All right, so let's do this, and we'll have our plan for the afternoon will be our 1:30 hearings. And those are 12 A, B, C, and D. And then we'll go on to Commissioners' business, announcements, agenda team requests, work session requests, review of assignments, 4 o'clock time certain for our executive session. And also, because we're having our evening meeting starting at 5:30, there will be food. Ms. Jones informs me there's going to be food at 4:30 p.m. for the board. Okay, so we're now in recess till 1:30.